As we jump back into junior church, things are going to look quite a bit different. Check-in will look the same, as we'll continue to require all kids to wear wristbands. However, we're actually changing the color of the wristbands. We have always used green wristbands, but now that we are requiring all attenders on Sunday mornings to wear either green, yellow, or red wristband, indicating their comfort level with personal touch, we're changing the nursery and junior church wristbands to the color blue. So all kids and workers will be required to wear a mask throughout the service. This is a church-wide requirement. Additionally, hand sanitizer will be required as people enter the library. And so one of the leaders or teachers are going to have a hand sanitizer pump and to give a pump to each child as they enter the library. All activity sheets, crafts, etc., should be handed out directly by the teacher and not passed out from child to child. When in the classroom, instruction should be done in the tabled area of the library and not use the little round chair area. Unfortunately, we don't want kids to be that close to one another. We want to spread them out further, and so that's why we're going to be asking that you use only the tabled area. And so all instruction, activities, everything should be done in that area. And we're going to require that kids sit in groups of 4 or less at the tables spread throughout the room. I know that these increased measures will make your job a little bit harder as a junior church teacher, but I'm really grateful for your help in ensuring the safety of each child entrusted to us. What hasn't changed is that we still want to answer 3 essential questions that parents are asking. Parents will ask, what are my kids going to learn? Will they have fun? And will they be safe? And it's my hope that yes, they'll learn something great, that the big idea, whether that is, God always loves you, whatever that is, we're hoping that the kids will continue to retain those big ideas and that they can share, I learned today that God always loves me. And number 2, will they have fun? My deepest longing is that they have a great time and really enjoy junior church and they want to learn about God. And then number 3 is, will they be safe? And that question is more pronounced now than ever. And it's my hope that we can not only impart godly wisdom to these kids, that they can feel God's love and our love as well, but ultimately that they have a great time and that they're safe. Now, regarding that last question, will they be safe? We're doing everything we can to ensure that. On top of the added safety measures of preventing COVID-19 and having an outbreak at Oasis, I want to remind you of our sexual abuse training. This may not come as a surprise, but the world we live in is not safe. No part of it is. Pre-COVID, it wasn't, and it's still not safe. And so we want to do everything that we can to ensure a safe place and to protect the kids' hearts, minds, and bodies. With that said, I want to share with you guys a few ground rules and protocols that we expect everyone at the Oasis who works with children to adhere to. The first one is check in and check out. In order to ensure a safe environment, whoever's on duty each day needs to be in position, ready to work 20 minutes before the service starts. So if you're there at the 8:30 service, you have to be at the check-in table. At least one of the workers has to be at the check-in table, ready to take kids in at 8:10. And you need to remain there through the beginning of service. You can go inside once the service starts and maybe stand by the usher greeter, but you need to remain in position throughout, from the 8:10 to 8:30, or if you're at the 10:30 service, at 10:10 to 10:30. And so you have to be in place to accept children, to help check them in. Next, we require all kids wear wristbands, numbered wristbands, and there's a number system that is on the check-in bin. And so we ask that you adhere to those systems. When kids are checked out, we ask that you cut off those wristbands so we know that they're actually supposed to be back out there. Because if we see blue wristbands outside that are still on, then my assumption is that they haven't been checked out and they're just a kid on the run. So even though kids love to have their wristbands with them, and some kids love to keep their wristbands on all week long, please cut those wristbands off. They can keep them with them if they want, but they need to be cut off. All right. So that is check-in, check-out, and wristbands. Also, another thing that we need to ensure to make sure that we have a safe working environment is that kids are in the right classrooms. Okay, so we need and we ensure that kids are in the right age appropriate classrooms. And so a few ways that we do that is that, like, for a second service, we usually break up kids into an older and a younger group. And if a first or second time family is in attendance and siblings are weary of leaving each other, we can allow older siblings to be with their younger siblings for the first week or two just to acclimate. But eventually they need to move back up to their own space. We don't want younger kids being in the older space because they'll get nothing. If older kids go down into a younger kids area, at least they're learning something, even if it's at a rudimentary level. But if a younger one goes into the older class, everything's over their head and they could be a distraction for the others. Sometimes parents are unsure about junior church. So we invite parents generally to check out the junior church classrooms for the first week or two, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on. If they want to continue to observe past like the first or second week, then they need to talk to Pastor David or myself so we can address those concerns. Also, there's a 2-person rule. We want to ensure safety and a safe environment, both for the child and for the adult, by making sure that no adult worker is ever alone with the child. And so we require that there's at least 2 adults with the children at all times. At no time is an adult ever allowed to be alone with a child. Now, if we don't have 2 adult workers, then we can't open a classroom. So both adults must remain with children until all the children are picked up after the services. Because of where the children meet, kids can use the restroom on their own. We don't have to go assist them. So adults shouldn't be in a position when they're alone with a child in the bathroom. That shouldn't be an issue. Next, reporting abuse and incidents. One of the biggest threats that face the church today is not demonic attack or heresy, though those are real threats. The biggest threat that we face is unreported abuse. Abuse occurs in many ways and by many different people. And for this reason, we must be clear about what is and is not abuse and how to report it. As people who work with children, we are mandated reporters, and that means that you have the legal obligation to report abuse if you see it, if you hear about it, and if you don't, then you are putting yourself under the penalty of prosecution because you are required to report child abuse and neglect. Now, abuse comes in several forms, so I want to break those down into 3 categories. Number 1 is physical abuse. Physical abuse is any physical injury inflicted with ill intent, but not, which includes, but it's not limited to, biting, burning, hitting, scratching, shaking. So that's physical abuse. Number 2, sexual abuse is any tricked, forced, manipulated, or coerced sexual activity for the sexual pleasure of the abuser. And that can be a physical thing or even just a mental thing. Like, it doesn't have to be actual touch. It can be, forcing a child to do something that's voyeuristic instead of just physical. And then lastly, neglect. That's when a child's basic needs of food, shelter, or care are neglected. Unfortunately, these incidents occur way more often than we know. Most cases of abuse will never be reported due to the intense shame on the part of the victim. But fortunately, many victims or even witnesses to abuse still do seek to disclose abuse. They aren't always clear, but if we are paying attention, we can see the warning signs often of children. This includes for physical abuse, bleeding or bruising, being skittish, feeling, telling unreasonable stories about how they got an injury. For sexual abuse, a change in hygiene, phobias, depression, inappropriate sexual desires or knowledge, overly concerned about close loved ones, or even self-harm. For neglect, hunger, malnourishment, tattered clothing, or a lack of hygiene. So if for some reason you suspect abuse, the best thing you can do is to remain calm and to ask these 4 clarifying questions. We don't ask leading questions. We don't investigate. All we do is ask 4 clarifying questions to see whether or not what we suspect is possibly abuse. These are the 4 questions. Number 1, what happened? Very simply, what happened? Number 2, where did it happen? We need to know the details of when and where it happened and all that. Number 3, when did it happen? And number 4, by whom did it happen? We don't want to ask any more questions about that because we just want to make sure that there's not an immediate threat. That's our biggest concern is that, if a child alleges abuse and, you suspect that there's an immediate threat, we want to make sure that we can call the police, that we can, respond immediately to that issue. Asking more questions than those four can potentially lead children into wrong thinking and misremembering what has occurred, and it can actually compromise their testimony, leading to the possibility of inadmissible evidence and the release of the perpetrator. So the reason that we don't ask more questions is because ultimately it goes against justice. That's an injustice in itself. So if you aren't sure whether or not what was just described to you is abuse, then consult another adult or ask one of the pastors. But in the case that you suspect abuse, you must report it. Always err on the side of caution and report suspected abuse. I would rather ask for forgiveness for wrongfully reporting abuse than to wrongfully keep my suspicion to myself. And remember, it is a crime not to report. Okay, so how do you report them? Well, first off, you call 911. If there's an immediate issue, call 911 immediately. Stop whatever you're doing and call 911. Now, it's also vital that you call Arizona Department of Child Safety as well. You can reach them at 520-887-7577. Call DCS because the police and DCS don't always communicate with one another. So if one decides not to pursue any action, the other might. So always call both. Now, after calling the police and DCS, then let Pastor David or myself know what's going on so we can deal with it as well. But ultimately, if you see something, say something, because it's ultimately up to you and it's your responsibility, and you are a mandated reporter for working with children. All right, I want to clear up some common misconceptions regarding sexual abuse. There's 7 misconceptions I want to share with you. The first one is that sexual abuse isn't common, but unfortunately, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men are thought to be victims of sexual abuse. And in reality, these numbers could be infinitely higher since victims are usually slow to disclose that they ever do. Number 2, the second misconception is that background checks catch abusers. Unfortunately, background checks only prove that people haven't been caught. Unfortunately, the average prosecuted abuser has on average 150 or more incidences of abuse before being prosecuted, which means that there are a lot of people that are walking around who are child abusers and people who hurt people that may never get caught. The third misconception is that abusers meet a certain and specific visual profile, but unfortunately abusers come in all shapes, sizes, genders, temperaments, economic backgrounds. The fourth misconception is that abusers are usually adult males. While most abusers are males, the average age of a first-time sexual abuser is 13 years old, which means that most abusers start way before they ever become an adult. The fifth misconception is that abusers only seek female victims. Unfortunately, we know that's not true based on the statistics of 25% of women and 17% of men being sexually abused in their lifetime. Also, there's 2 different types of abusers. There's preferential abusers. Those are people who prefer a certain type of person or a certain profile. Or there's opportunistic abusers, and those are people who just abuse because there's an opportunity to abuse, because there's a vulnerable child and they have the chance to do that. That's why we don't want to put children in any sort of situation where they could potentially be abused, or somebody could potentially allege abuse against you. That's why we enforce the 2-person rule. That's why we enforce never being alone with a child. The last one, the second to last one, is that children will disclose abuse. The Department of Justice estimates that only 3% of sexual predators will ever be caught and prosecuted. In large part, that's because people so seldomly disclose their abuse. Additionally, the average age of an abuse victim who does disclose abuse is 30 years old, which means that they've been holding on to that shame and they've been holding on to that abuse for a very long time. Children don't often disclose abuse, but they sometimes do try to. And so that's why we have to be careful and listen well. The last misconception about abuse is that abuse is mostly stranger danger. Unfortunately, that's not true. 90% of abuse victims personally know their abuser. In most cases, it's a close family, it's a close friend or a family member. So those are the misconceptions about abuse that I want to share with you. Regarding other incidences, if at any time a child is injured while they're in our care, we need to fill out an ouch report. We need to act swiftly This means that we need to apply first aid, and should it be necessary. And it also means that we must fill out an ouch report. These can be found in the classroom binder that are in your supplies. And this is how they should be filled out. They should have a description of the injury sustained, whether it's large or small, a description of the treatment given, and then any further suggested treatments. You need to fill this thing out twice, because one needs to be given to the parent, and then one needs to be kept for church records as well. The church's copy should be put in the offering box, which can be found in the NPR. So after you fill it out, just fold it up and throw it in the box before you leave for the day. This helps our children. It informs our parents and ensures our parents that their children are being well cared for. Another important part of ensuring a safe environment for all of our kids is to make sure that we staff our classrooms with the best people. And so all staff and volunteers who work with children must do at least 4 things. One is to wait a minimum of 6 months before arriving to work with children. This helps us to get to know one another. It helps us to get on board with each other, us with you and you with us, and to make sure that we believe the same things, that you're on board with the vision and the mission of the church. But it also makes sure that that opportunistic abusers don't have opportunity to abuse, because a lot of times churches have a bad reputation for being a soft target, because people are in need of children's workers, so they'll just let anyone come and work with kids. But that's why we require people to wait 6 months, is because Chester the molester is not going to wait 6 months to get into contact with children. He's going to move to a softer target. Secondly, they must be an active member of the church. This ensures that you're growing in community, that you're not just pouring out your cup and you don't have anyone pouring back in. And so we want to make sure that you are being poured into as well. Number 3, you must be an active attender of our Sunday gatherings. This means that you must attend the service and work the other. So if you make the commitment to serve, you also need to make the commitment to be poured into and to be a part of our Sunday services. And then lastly, number 4 is to clear a national background check at the Oasis every 3 years. And so we repeat background checks every 3 years. And just, if somebody does have something that comes up on the background check, that's not necessarily indicative of not being able to work with children. If people do have background issues, we can work around some of those things. I mean, some people will never work with. I mean, if you have a conviction for sexual abuse, like, you will never work with children. But if you've got, a DUI on your background check from 20 years ago, like, okay, God works in really cool ways. And, if there's growth in your life, and if you're in a different place, then we'll talk about that. But we want to make sure that we're staffing children. I mean, we're staffing our classrooms with the very best people who love Jesus and who love children. I just want to cover some miscellaneous things before we finish up. The first one is food and water. Desert Sky asks that we don't consume any food, gum, or drinks in the classrooms, with the exception of bottled water. So this applies to the kids and to the volunteers. Water only in those spaces. Next, equipment use. At no point should we be using any teacher supplies or classroom equipment without permission from the school. This includes use of the AV equipment. And lastly, time off requests. If you guys have time off requests that you'd like to make, then please let me know in advance. I'll be putting together a short schedule for August and September, and then I'll be putting that off further. I'll make a calendar through the end of the year after we get back into the swing of things. So please let me know ahead of time if you guys can't be there, and I'll make the schedule accordingly. Most teachers are scheduled every week, with a week off every 4 to 5 weeks. Some classrooms have helpers who are scheduled on a once every 3 to 4 weeks basis, and then there's also substitutes who just periodically serve. Find the position that works best for you, and we want to make sure that you have a place where you can give back, where you can serve, and where you can pour your life into these kids. So yeah, I just want to let you guys know about all that. In case of emergency, if something comes up and you can't be there last minute, call Pastor David or myself, let us know, and we'll figure something out. We'll be able to get you guys coverage, I'm sure. But we thank you so much for being a part of this vital team, being a part of shaping our children's hearts, minds, and spirits. And I'm really, really excited to get back to serving alongside you guys on August 23rd. Can't wait to be back in person, and can't wait to see what God's doing in your lives and what he's going to do in the life of our children as well. All right. Thank you so much.